Hello, I'm Luna, an astrologer and tarot reader of over 8 years, and today we're going to be taking a look at Katy Perry's birth chart, look at her transits to see why she has been having such a hard time this past year between the trip to space and her tour and now the ending of her relationship with Orlando Bloom. I just did a reading on them too if you guys want to take a look at that one. But yeah, we're going to take a look at her transits and see what's going on. And if you would like your own personalized reading, there is currently 25% off this eclipse season. So be sure to book that before it's gone. And if you would like your own synastry or birth chart or career reading, you just let me know when you click down on the drop down menu when you purchase. So we're going to start off by taking a look at her transits. Now, the main thing that's kind of calling my attention is she has this Uranus transit that has just finished kind of aspecting her north node. So she's had Uranus on her north node on these latter degrees for a while now. Uranus is a planet that has a lot to do with freedom and releasing you from the shackles of things in your life that have been restricting you, even if that can come through a whiplash moment. Uranus in the 7th house is pretty notorious for ending relationships and throwing you into singlehood when you least expect it. I just did a reading on Sydney Sweeney as well, and she also ended her engagement with her fiance of many years. She was also going through a Uranus transit through her 7th house. Now, Uranus here in the 7th house indicates that her relationship is going to start to hold her back in certain ways. Now, this has been a very long transit. She's had Uranus in Taurus since around 2018. Now, I don't know how long she's been with Orlando Bloom, but I do think that she's been in her relationship with him pretty much the entirety of this transit. And I do think that, that relationship really did take her away from the spotlight, and she hasn't really been doing a ton in her career for a minute now. She kind of took a step back. She had a baby. She got engaged to Orlando. She was focusing on herself. And then this year, she really was ready to kind of come out of the woodworks and step into the public eye again. Now, I do think with Uranus, whenever it is on one of the angles, any planet that is on the angles, meaning on the ascendant, descendant, IC, or the MC, it's going to aspect all of the major areas of life. So Uranus in the 7th house will square her 4th house, which is the house of home and private life. It's going to square her midheaven, which is her public life, her career, and it's going to oppose her ascendant, which is her identity and her sense of self. So she has been going through a massive radicalization of who she thought she was, what her career was going to be, and what her home life was going to be. I do know that she was previously married, and I do think she, not shown on the screen here, but she has a Chiron in her 7th house as well with Uranus. Uranus is also activating her Chiron at this time. And Chiron in the 7th house indicates that there's going to be a need for healing or major wounds in her relationships. Ariana Grande also has this placement, and people with Chiron in the 7th house or Chiron conjunct Venus, like Selena Gomez, they're going to have major difficulties and pains in relationships and marriage. And so that can mean a divorce, that can mean long periods of singlehood. And with Uranus here, it indicates that there's going to be a radicalization of whatever is normalized in that area of her life. And for her, I do think that she has had plenty of experiences of instability in her relationships for years and years on end. So ironically, Uranus in the 7th house, a radicalization for Katy Perry was stability. Being at home, having a baby, being engaged to one man for many years, and having that sense of stability in home and family life that she hasn't had pretty much in her entire adult life. And so Uranus here was really teaching her about how maybe a lot of the issues in her relationships and in her life were coming from instability to her private life and into her relationships, and maybe learning to outgrow certain needs for maybe destroying things, because she has a Scorpio stellium which opposes her 7th house. And she has a Sun-Pluto conjunction, which means she's prone to starting and ending things and rising and falling. And so her whole downfall in her career right now is not at all surprising. That is baked into her identity. So I don't think that this is the last that we'll see of Katy. She's going to have, she's going to rise back up again. But the Sun-Pluto conjunction and Uranus on the 7th house opposing her Scorpio stellium over these past 8 years or so has really been teaching her the way in which she might be the source of the instability and chaos in her life. And she was out learning that. However, as Uranus finished up its transit through Taurus, it reached her North Node. And the North Node is all about soul evolution and moving towards what you're meant to do in this life. And Uranus being there could indicate that something about the way that she was moving about her relationship may have caused her to lose herself. And that's because she has her South Node in her first house, which means that the South Node in the first house indicates that there needs to be a death of the identity in order for her to have significant growth in her relationships. However, Uranus there indicates that whatever this soul evolution towards marriage and relationships was also making her feel like she was losing a major part of who she was, and she was feeling tied down and feeling like she was forgetting herself. Uranus here, again, in Taurus, has been squaring her midheaven. And while she was focusing on her relationships, her career was definitely thrown into chaos, right? So she ended up kind of trying to change her image a few times, trying new things with her career, and then that all backfired, and she ended up deciding to go back to her roots and, back to the black hair and back to the Katy Perry that we all know. However, because Uranus is here, she's being challenged to find a new way to embody her old self. And that's because, again, she's got a Scorpio rising. She's ruled by Pluto. Her Pluto's conjunct her sun. The entirety of her entire life is focused on the process of death and rebirth over and over and over again, and how to make something old new again. And so she's having a bit of a conflict between how to get back into the world as a new version of herself, while also bringing to people what they've always loved about her. And one of the things that people have been talking a lot about, what they don't like about this new revival of Katy Perry, is that it feels kitschy, like it feels like she's trying to do what she used to do in a time where that's no longer cool or funny. And I do know that there was like this one song that was going viral on TikTok, an old song that she made many years ago, that people were like, if she would just like unironically embody, this version of herself, instead of feeling like she has to be, the big kitschy girl on stage, maybe we would like her more. And I think that's very Uranus on the North Node, which is get out of your comfort zone, create chaos, but not in a way that is chaos for chaos sakes. Like, don't go on stage with a giant toilet just because it's what you used to do and seems outlandish. But find a new way to reinvent yourself that still holds true to the roots of why everyone used to like you to begin with. And I think that this ties into her relationship and the divorce that she's going through, in the sense that that relationship might have made her feel like she got a lot of that stability she was seeking that she didn't realize she was needing, and made her lose herself, because Uranus is opposing all of her Scorpio stuff, which made her feel like she maybe went into a different extreme that she wasn't used to. She was, again, for the large majority of her life, a pop star who was touring the world. Everybody knew her name. Like, all she did was work. And then for the period of time that she was with Orlando, she had the freedom to try and do new things and try the quiet life and try focusing on that area of her life. Uranus squaring her 4th house. But what's interesting is Pluto entered Aquarius late 2024. It's stationed into Aquarius for the next 20 years. And lo and behold, she doesn't get divorced because they were never married, but she pretty much ends a significant relationship with a man who she's had a child with. Her home life has just completely been turned to dust. That's very Pluto, in the 4th house kind of vibes. And her Pluto in Aquarius squares her natal Pluto. So she has Pluto in Scorpio, and she has her sun there as well in those first early degrees of Scorpio. And Pluto's been squaring the shit out of those placements for a while now for her, which indicates that there was a sudden, especially with Uranus also opposing all of her Scorpio stuff, I need to get out of here. I feel stuck. Like a feeling of being trapped in her own life probably came about, and feeling like she needed to get back out there and, get back to her roots and redefine herself. And I also think, one of the things that I did see a lot of people talk about was like she has a little bit of an ego when it comes to like being a pop star, and she feels a little bit like she was making some comments about other pop stars and like kind of just saying, I used to be one of those girls. I am one of those girls. I was a pop star, like kind of reiterating the massive success that she's acquired in her life. And those are all very true, right? She has a Sun-Pluto conjunction. She is a force to be reckoned with. However, this Pluto square to her sun is really challenging her ego. Ryan Reynolds is going through something similar as well. And, all of the things that used to make Katy Perry, everybody's like, we hate that. All the things that used to make Ryan Reynolds, everyone's like, we hate that now. And that's like a really strong blow to the ego. Both Ryan and Katy have this, like, I think he has a Sun-Pluto conjunction as well, but he also has a Sun-Mars conjunction. So they're both very egoic people who are going through, when we're dealing with Pluto, we're dealing with generations. We're dealing with the collective change of like everybody's values shifting, and what does Gen Z think, right? Pluto is the younger generations. It's just the fact that everything that used to mean something will one day return to dust. And when Pluto squares your sun, especially for these big stars like Ryan or Katy, that process can feel extremely humbling and almost absolutely soul destroying. So she is going through a dark night of the soul for sure. Pluto on the sun. She's been going through it, honestly, even before this tour. I think that the stress of even putting on the tour and all of the things that she's been doing to make this transition happen in her life has been putting pressure on her relationships, her marriage, her children, and her legacy. When we're dealing with Pluto squaring the sun and she's got a Pluto conjunction, this is about her feeling like she's losing her legacy. Like her legacy, her identity is really tied up in the legacy that she wants to leave behind, and feeling like that legacy is being corrupted or destroyed. And if I was her astrologer, I would really push her to roll with the punches instead of trying to hold on to what used to be. And that is one of the things about Pluto. Pluto rules empires, but it also rules the fact that every empire will one day fall. And with Uranus on her North Node, this is an incredible time for her to redefine who she used to be in a way that's more liberating, instead of feeling like she needs to go back to what used to work and needs to go back to the empire that she used to have in the past. I do think with Uranus here, this is an opportunity for her to lean into something kind of unique and different, that was the essence of why she became Katy Perry. And I think that, a lot of the reason that Katy Perry became Katy Perry was because she was embodying this kind of weird girl who's also hot in the 2000s, where that was really weird, right? Like, everyone was trying to be hot and beautiful and skinny. And then Katy Perry comes along with like squirting whipped cream out of her bra. And it was like this fun twist on the hot girl, right? And I think that she needs to get back to that idea of redefining her brand, not as the hot girl who just does weird stuff for the sake of being weird, but understanding that the reason that her brand used to work was because it was pioneering in some way. And a lot of the things that she did back in the 2000s that were pioneering are just kind of normal and not that cool anymore. And so I think that she needs to get back to what used to make my brand so unique and different, right? And she has this Leo on the ascendant, Leo on the midheaven. Her public image needs to center her as a performer, but it's still ruled by the Sun conjunct Pluto in Scorpio. Like, there has to be something edgy, weird, and kind of pushing the script, and she's no longer pushing the script. She's just trying to get back to what used to work, and that's not working anymore. And I also think with Uranus conjunct the North Node, you know, her brand is built on not being universally accepted, at least not at the beginning. She was kind of like a weird alt girl from the very beginning, even though she was like, you know, a church girl, and her whole brand, even from when she was a child, was like to kind of go against what her environment or her community was doing. And so, you know, I Kissed a Girl was like the biggest song ever back in the 2000s, because she was like, you know, this church girl. Like, her saying that was like wild at the time. And I think she needs to get back to the roots of like understanding that her brand is meant to be controversial, and maybe leaning into it a little bit instead of feeling like she's kind of in this place where she's begging for validation again. And I know that that could be really hard with a Pluto square to Sun, where you're feeling really, you know, like you're losing your sense of pride and your sense of identity. She's definitely going through an ego death at this time. The North Node is moving into her 4th house. So even though I think, you know, there's been some difficulty in her relationship with Orlando, I don't think that the themes around home and family are going to fall to the background. She also has the South Node's about to go through her 10th house. And Jupiter will soon join it in her 10th house. So I do think that she needs to get comfortable with some sort of massive ending and transition in her public image. When you go through the South Node in the 10th house, you may experience a dip in public validation. Sydney Sweeney's going through that right now. She's had the South Node in her 10th house, and people are getting a little bit of that Sydney Sweeney oversaturation. Like, people are kind of, she's in everyone's face to a degree that people are like, oh my gosh, we don't like you anymore. And that always happens. It's going to happen with anybody who has a career in the public eye. Is like, there will be seasons of when people love you and when people hate you. And I do think it's interesting that Jupiter will soon join the South Node in Katy's 10th house, which lets me know that her tapping into nostalgia, or tapping into something that she felt like she couldn't do in the past, and maybe she can now do because she has the pop stardom. And what I mean by that is, like, maybe something that she tried to do early on in her career wasn't validated because it wasn't pop enough, or her label discouraged it when she was still just a young new girl on the block. Now, the good news with her legacy, with Sun-Pluto conjunction and Pluto squaring her Sun, is that she could use her legacy to try something new and different now, because she's already built a brand and she's already built credibility. And maybe she should go back to something that she used to aspire to, that's a little more homey, closer to her heart, less corporate, less, you know, especially when we're dealing with Leo, less attention seeking, less what people usually want, and do something that tugs at her heartstrings, or tugs at some sort of nostalgia or an older version of herself from the past. Could bring her some career success. And I think with that one song, I don't remember the name of the song. I'm not a particularly big Katy fan, but that song kind of going viral on TikTok, bringing back an old sound that she kind of discarded in the past, maybe bringing that back and owning it, could actually bring her some unexpected growth in her career with a new audience. Instead of trying to get to the young people, maybe get to the older folk with South Node, could indicate like people who have always loved her, to cater to her existing fan base instead of trying to get back on being like the new Barbie on the block, right? What else? So Saturn's been in her 5th house, 4th and 5th houses for a few years now. I don't know when she had her child, but Saturn was in her 4th house around 2022, 2023. So I don't know how old her baby is, but maybe that's when she had a baby. I'm not sure. But Saturn in the 4th house is a time where she was really solidifying like her life as a parent. And Saturn in the 5th house is still pretty focused on children. But now it's going to enter Aries. So I think that 2026, especially with the South Node entering her 10th house and Jupiter entering her 10th house, she's going to try to assert herself, be more bold and more pioneering in her creativity. Even though this tour hasn't been what she expected, I think that there will be some unexpected strokes of luck or pockets of inspiration that come from maybe this dark time in her life. And, you know, a lot of artists' biggest works and biggest breakthroughs in their career come from, you know, really dramatic or difficult times in their lives. So what else do we have going on here? It's Jupiter, that's Uranus, Saturn, Pluto. This Pluto square is going to be going on for a while. And it's going to just keep squaring her moon, her Mercury, her Saturn. I don't think this is going to be an easy era for Katy. I think that this is really going to be a time that really tests her strength and her ability to be reborn and to go through ego death. And I do think she's going to be going through a really spiritual time in her life. Pluto squares have a way of reminding you of your own mortality or your own humanness, and humbling you in a way that really brings you back to what it is that truly matters. And when it comes to like a pop star like Katy, who has been in the Hollywood machine and like doing a lot of things just because it succeeds and just because it gets views and hits, I think that this Pluto square is really going to challenge her to start getting that validation from within herself again and start doing things that honor her, even if they're flopping. And she has been flopping for a little while now. But I think that even in her, with Uranus going through her 7th house, opposing her Scorpio stellium, when she was trying a lot of new things with her brand and her look and her music, I think it was still coming from a place of rebellion. Like, I just want to do the opposite of what you want from me. And I think that this time with Pluto squaring all of her Scorpio and the South Node and Jupiter entering her 10th house and Saturn in Aries in her 5th house, she's going to be called to get back to that version of her that believed in herself before everyone else did, that, you know, went out there and got herself a record deal and figured it out when nobody else was really believing in her. I think she's going to have to get back to building that self-esteem and that sense of validation for her art and her career from within again. And that's going to feel really uncomfortable for her because she's been at the top and she's been succeeding and she's been, you know, on this Pluto power trip for a very long time, and having to get back there and get back to that version of her that believed in her own power before it was given to her is going to be a challenge. But I think that she's a very strong woman. She has so much, she has these like Saturn Pluto generational conjunctions to her personal planets. She even has this Mars in Capricorn conjunct Jupiter. She's incredibly hardworking. She's a visionary, and she's really lucky and has the hard work to be able to get through the hard stuff. But I do think that this transit that she's going to be going through, honestly, for the next 5 years is going to be really, really humbling. The South Node in the 10th house is humbling. Pluto squares are humbling. Even now that Uranus is on her Chiron, this is about like really having to face her fears and get out of her comfort zone. So that is all I have for Katy. Let me know what you guys thought of what's going on with her, what you guys think she should be doing with her career. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.